Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Up next in our entertainment and pop culture segment brought to you by Caldwell Soames, we're joined by our regular contributor, Paul Caldwell, chairman and CEO of Caldwell Soames. And today he's joined by our dear friend, Daphne Barak, an Israeli-American documentary celebrity interviewer, author, and confidant to the stars. She is known for landing the big fish interviews. She has spent the last 2 decades speaking with heads of state, royals, Hollywood stars, musicians, athletes, and newsmakers. She has interviewed numerous personalities, including Michael Jackson's father, O.J. Simpson, Hillary Clinton, Nelson Mandela, Kevin Federline, that's Britney Spears' ex, and now Ghislaine Maxwell. That's just to name a few. Today, we're chatting about the scoops, impact, and glory that motivates reporters. The drive to be first with the basic facts of a newsworthy development remains embedded in the culture of newsrooms and in the minds of journalists and reporters. The daily news cycle at CBS, ABC, CNN, and Newsmax continues to get top priority on many exclusive articles, although a growing number are now currently being published online. But there is an obvious signal to reporters currently trending. Old-fashioned scoops still very much count. When you can look at all the dots everyone can look at and be the first to connect them in a meaningful and convincing way, well, that's something. Two major goals of these reporters are to hold the powerful accountable and to right the wrongs. Here to chat Hollywood scoops, scandals, and media are my dear friends Daphne Barak and Paul Caldwell. Welcome to the show, my friends.
I was happy to be here with two good friends.
Daphne, welcome back. Paul, nice to see you again. Daphne, I'm going to start with you. At the center of all your scoops lives the Britney Spears, Kevin Federline story, a troubled one at that. How did you connect with Kevin? And in interviewing Britney's children and ex-husband, what have you learned?
First of all, I've interviewed then the entire family. I mean, we also broke the silence of Britney's father, Jamie Spears. We had headlines a few weeks ago. We talked to Lynn Spears. We did the only TV interview with Brian Spears, the brother. So actually, we did in-depth. We are in the middle of some announcement are coming about that, although most was released, some was released already on 60 Minutes Australia, ITV News, the front pages of the Mail on Sunday, The Sun, and of course, worldwide. But I actually was asked by a president of a network to look into the story, see which exclusive I want to land because nobody spoke. I did talk to a couple of members of the family, but for me, the question was, there are two kids, which now are very close to my husband and I, Bill and I, Preston and Jaden, fantastic two kids. And I said, so far, we haven't heard that they're on drugs or one of the disturbed kids went into a church and did a massacre. So with such a public situation, public drama, ongoing drama since they were born, right? Who is raising these kids? And for that reason, I called Kevin Federline. We met and I found a very different person from the person we all remembered 13 years ago, like, you know, a dancer. Maybe his image was a bit like lightheaded. I'm not sure it's true, but suddenly it's a very mature father who dedicates his entire life to his 6 children, and its situation. It hasn't been easy, you know, to have to live with such a drama and so public. You wake up every morning, you don't know what to expect. And not that I'm saying that it's Britney's fault. Britney is not to blame that in her problems, and definitely the fact that it's been so public hasn't been helpful to her. And there are many accusations on her end against her family, and we have to listen to all sides. But it hasn't been easy for the boys, and they're both talented. Jaden is playing the piano, Preston is playing the guitar. They are composing their own music. Very well mannered. Very articulate, and they also needed to speak about the situation privately besides filming. And you know, Kevin and his wife Victoria, what we call stepmother, but really a nice stepmother, managed to give all the mixed children normal life despite the abnormality around them.
Wow.
And it's sort of like a safe
Wow.
house.
So you are definitely confident to the stars. Now you've taken on the emotional baggage as well, and you're steering this and being very, very careful and detailed about what's being released at the same time to the public. And of course, we love Britney Spears over here. I mean, her debut single, Baby One More Time, was at the #1 spot in more than 20 countries. And the album by the same name, actually released in the year 2000, sold over 1 million records in the first week and became her highest selling album with over 25 million copies sold. And she's one of the top selling female artists of the 21st century. But her family life is a very different situation. So I can't wait to read and see these interviews. Paul, you personally ingest tons of media and are in fact in it yourself. You have been part of the public eye for several years now. How important is it for truthful and transparent reporting when it comes to American culture and media? And what concerns do you have as a parent and accomplished entrepreneur with media manipulation, whether it being cultural or political?
I think it's really important, Zen. The truthful, fact-based, unbiased reporting is essential when we're talking about reporting. On the other hand, if we're talking about entertainment, then therein lies when ideology sort of creeps into the mix. I think the problem is when reporting is biased, and the people that are doing the reporting allow their ideology or their ideologies allowed into a story, current affairs, or whatever. But that ideological twist then starts to skew things one way or another, typically. And then what happens is, it might make more interesting news or might make more interesting content. But I will tell you that context does matter. And the news is really just the news these days, and its entertainment value sometimes seems more important than just the facts. And I think that's a big part of the problem, because there's so many different ways now to consume content. Internet, your phone. I mean, you cannot get away from it. So it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's prolific. And if you look at the newsstand still, the rags at the newsstand when you check out, that's still where the very best copywriters, I heard Gary Halbert one time say, the most highly paid writers in the world write for those papers that are at the newsstand when you check out of the grocery store.
Yeah.
And Warren Buffett is to have said, I don't know if he did or not, but I read one time that he said, people will pay you more to entertain them than they will to educate them. So I think that the news itself has taken on an entertainment value into it that really has quite frequently skews just the basic facts.
Well said. Well said.
And
I love
think,
that perspective.
And I think if I can just inject something, Paul, and then it's not only the fact. I think what guides me is I'm trying to put myself instead of the interviewee, or whether they are head of state or a royal or a big celebrity. I'm trying to think, how would I feel if I were Britney and somebody, even with good intention, as my father, would take all my rights and try to be me, right? And that's horrible.
Yes. And I was going to actually ask you and stay on that thought. So let's chat Ghislaine. So Ghislaine Noel Marion Maxwell is a British convicted sex offender and a former socialite. Just for reference, for those listening, in 2021, she was found guilty of child sex trafficking and other offenses in connection with the financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And in June of 2022, she was sentenced in a New York court to 20 years imprisonment. Now, Daphne, you had access to her in prison via network exclusive. In interviewing her, do you feel she is guilty? Does she show any remorse? Like, do you see it or feel it? And is there any security risk for her in her cell? What are your thoughts?
Good question. All three. Well, security risk, as we all know, it's been the headline around the world, that Jeffrey Epstein, whom she is described as collaborator, right, died in jail. Now, there are not many people who don't question how did it happen. I mean, the official version that he killed himself. There are many questions about it. So, and everybody knows that he knew many secrets. So Ghislaine, probably she said that at one point she distanced herself from him, but at one point she knew many of his secrets. So I asked her if she feels secure. I had 4 interviews with her. And she said that, jail is very scary. She did say she thinks that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered. And very scary. She's trying to survive to avoid situations. So that's a good question. Now, do I feel if she's guilty? Look, she's convicted. There's nothing, and she got 20 years. I feel she herself has been a victim of Epstein, about her childhood, which that doesn't vindicate her from doing these crimes. I mean, you cannot say I murdered somebody, but I had a terrible childhood. But you still murdered somebody, right? But I do feel bad that she was a victim. She always chose the wrong names, the wrong men, including the current one who she's divorcing, and she had to fight for her own money to get a chance to have an appeal. Does she show a remorse? Well, first of all, legally, she could not tell me she shows a remorse. Susan Zirinsky is the first woman president of CBS News, and myself and Bill, my husband, were going back and forth. Susan said, would you ask her about the remorse? I said, why are we going to? We fought to have a jail interview. It was so difficult to get it. The jail didn't want us to have it. So if we have 20 minutes video, are we going to waste the time? Or are we going to get information about Prince Andrew, which of course is making headlines all around the world because she told me he never met Virginia, his accuser, right, which he settled with. So she cannot say she shows a remorse. So no, she didn't show a remorse. And I think after her appeal, the end of February, I think depending the result, she should start showing remorse, because it is very offensive to the victims and the families. And it's a very valid question,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting perspective. The fact that you can even get these people to open up to you, you obviously have a special gift, which, Paul, I'm going to throw this to you. As a father and a businessman, watching all this unfold, when looking at the fascination society has with deceased, incarcerated, has-been personalities, like Ghislaine or Britney, Amy Winehouse, Michael Jackson, it's quite baffling. The commonality here is mental health disorder. But do you feel society gets off hearing about these celebrity shortcomings? And why does tragedy sell so big, in your opinion?
Well, I think people like entertainment. I think there's a certain degree of entertainment value in all of that. It's like in the middle. You have the news, which should be just reporting the facts. Then you have this other sort of media that's considered news, but really has ideological bent and entertainment value to it. And then you have a full-blown entertainment, a motion picture, a TV series, a Netflix series, whatever, that you actually watch for entertainment. I think the devastation and so forth sells so big because people like to know there are others that are worse off than they are. And
Yeah.
I think that people consume biased reporting so easily with all of that entertainment value and twist and interesting little things that they think are sexy or whatever. They want to consume that as well as biased reporting because it confirms their own ideologies. But I think people want to, do it sometimes just to ease anxiety or ease stress. But I think mostly what happens is most people, they just simply don't have a degree of self-control to just insulate themselves from all of what I consider most of that stuff just nonsense because I can't figure out how it makes my day or my family or people I care about actually any better. At the same time, some of it's very interesting stuff, very interesting information, but I think lack of self-control. And I think that's driven in large part by the fact that content can be consumed in so many ways. It's in our pockets. It's with us 24/7. I know of people that go to bed and go to sleep with their phone in their face, and that they fall asleep and wake up with their phone screen on their nose and stuff like. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what's going on these days, and it seems to be the way of it.
It does. That's very true. All right, Daphne, before I'm going to cut to a commercial break right now, but I have a very important question to ask you when we come back. So don't move a muscle. Guys, you're listening to Paul Caldwell and Daphne Barak. That was our entertainment and pop culture segment brought to you by Caldwell Soames. Definitely check out Daphne Barak at daphnebarak.com. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Caldwell Soames Incorporated, investing globally in transformative businesses like Original Digital Corporation, or ODC. ODC develops advanced consumer and commercial fintech solutions such as OG Pay, which will transform the way you manage your money. From sending and receiving money globally for free, paying for goods and services in person and online, pay bills, buy and sell digital currencies, all while earning interest. OG Pay is easy to set up, FDIC insured, and your information is secured. Check out ogpay.com.
Welcome back, my beautiful friends. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Welcoming back to our entertainment and pop culture segment brought to you by Caldwell Soames. We're chatting with the amazing Daphne Barak and our regular contributor, Paul Caldwell. Welcome back, Daphne.
I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so let's get to it. The U.S. press, like the U.S. government, is a corrupt and troubled institution. Corrupt in a systemic sense. It just basically fails to do what it claims to do, what it should do, and what society expects it to do. And at the heart of it all, most journalists and exclusive reporters share common elements, including the principles of truthfulness, fact-based communication, impartiality, fairness, respect for others, and public accountability. How do you interview criminals while remaining truthful and objective?
Well, I think my big dilemma was when I nailed the first interview with O.J. Simpson after he was found not guilty. And, the country was divided. Some bought it and some said, well, And I just think you really have to put yourself not in an emotional place, and you really have to ask the questions and ask again until you feel that, you just got as deep as you can. Now, what we say about interviewing criminals, but there is something that I guess the society is attracted to it. That's why we have in Netflix and all these streamers, a TV series about jail or about crime or about so there is something in us which is attracted to connect to it. Yeah. The only thing I think then and Paul is the danger not to glamorize it. I mean, the moment you give it glorification, then you really cross the line. Because I mean, my job is to get the big gets. So the criminals that I interview are basically, whether it was O.J. Simpson or Ghislaine Maxwell, or at one point Mike Tyson, who actually has rehabilitated his life fantastically. So there are famous people who basically found themselves incarcerated, right? But still, let's not get it. A crime is a crime, and there is no way or no reason or no justification to glamorize it.
Yeah, well said. All right. Well, I know we're out of time here in just a minute, but Paul, last question. Chatting phenomenon of bombshells that dominate news cycles only to be debunked later. And you, Daphne, you could pipe in here too after he answers the question. But this is some examples. Back in 2020, we saw what the media dubbed as a reckless conspiracy theory when Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas claimed that COVID-19 may have come from a Chinese lab, now considered an absolute reality, but then was in fact investigated. Then we saw Trump ordering park police in DC to use tear gas on what the media said mostly peaceful protesters. That was another huge story. But a Justice Department Inspector General's report later released saying it wasn't true at all. Or how about the vaccines? They save our lives. We must go get ours immediately, to only find out now that they actually pose a potential huge health risk for many. So why is it that seemingly every huge breaking news story that ends up being hopelessly wrong is originally weaponized against one party, mainly the Republicans, to benefit the other, the Democrats? Why do these mistakes only go in one direction? Just want to get your perspective here, Paul.
I think they go in both directions, Zen. There may be one weighted more than the other. I understand all of that, but I think that the reality is that these ideologically far right-wing, far left-wing ideologies that perpetuate inside these organizations that report this news, really, they're sort of like educational entertainment, edutainment, or something like that. They're trying to talk about a situation today and they report it, people believe it as being a fact. It's really not a fact. And I think if people just would, exhibit more self-control and ask themselves, how does me sitting here investing 30 minutes or an hour or more of my time listening to this person that I don't even know tell me about a story that I don't even know how it matters to me or what. I mean, just some more critical thing. But that kind of went out the window with social media and where our society is today. And I think that you see more of that bent, that trend on the left to do these things, and the right side, the more conservative people, find themselves on their left foot because they're typically not willing to go quite as far or amass the type of support that the more liberal ideologies seem to be able to get. It's kind of like words matter too, right? I always find it funny when you can even see well-educated, well-spoken, even people in Congress, senators, say things like, this is Mary, blah, 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 from the Democratic Party, right? For example. Well, that puts in someone's mind that lady's from the party that's Democratic, more Democratic than the other party, when it's really the Democrat Party. The party is the Democrat Party. It's
Yes.
not the Democratic Party. It's the Democrat Party. And but it's interesting. People just don't, I think there's no real reason either, because the next thing they do is they switch that off and go to Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, you could just go on all day if you want to stay on these things.
Yeah.
I've been trying to figure out how all these newspapers are even staying in business, but they are, and they've reinvented themselves through digital. And, it's interesting to watch, but I frankly, personally, I don't invest a lot of time in it. I have opinions like everybody else has opinions. But to answer your question, I just think it's because of, they are providing the consumer what the consumer wants, whether it's right-wing ideology, left-wing ideology, conservative, liberal, somewhere in the middle. They're giving the consumer what the consumer has been shown to prove they want.
Yeah. Yeah. Good perspective. Well, thank you for answering that. I mean, I always like to get different points of view when it comes to that question. Everybody answers it differently, but it's actually what you said is very true. That is at the heart of it all. Paul, thank you so much for coming on and joining us. It was a pleasure chatting with you today.
Hey, my pleasure, Zen. Take care.
That was Paul Caldwell, Chairman and CEO of Caldwell Soames. That was our entertainment and pop culture segment. Do check out ogpay.com. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. We'll be right back after this.